Shalom, shalom, shalom. So, bring this down a little bit. Today we're going to look at a lesson on words mean things. So, the word we're going to use today is the word Christian. Let me write it up here. It's words mean things. And so our word today is Christians, or Christian. All right. So when I first came into this walk, people were constantly giving me words, definitions, what they meant, and their interpretation and the way they read them as I began to study for myself were often based on a slant of the person that they were probably regurgitating the information from. And so the reason why I chose this word today, let me give a little preface to that, is because I think two, maybe 3 Shabbats ago now, but I think it was, 3 Shabbats ago, More did a lesson here in, talked about people always calling us names. And so one of the things that I was taught early in coming into this walk, or what was conveyed to me, was that Christian meant, Christian was a negative term. It was given to us as a derogatory term, or given to people as a derogatory term. Christian was given, obviously, by Romans or in Gentile lands. And we'll look through all those things today. I'm not saying these things are right or wrong. I'm telling you what was told to me. And so being zealous, like a lot of us are very early in our awakening to a lot of these things, I began to perpetuate a lot of negative behaviors because of how this word was conveyed to me. And by doing so, you turn a lot of people off. And I don't know if anybody who's new to this walk, or people who have been in this walk, or people who are becoming frustrated with the amount of knowledge they have and how to carry it out, are seeing that the frustration and the zeal that a lot of people have is not according to knowledge, which then in turn mars our ability to be able to properly convey what we know to people who are either ignorant or in denial of the truths of Scripture. Okay, so when I grew up, I understood this word, Christian, to mean a follower of Christ. So when I first came into this walk, that was hard for me to give up, because I wasn't fully aware of my identity as much as I was aware of the fact that it was important for me to start embracing the culture of my ancestors. And so this term Christian, as I meant it to be a follower of Christ, when I first came into this walk, I was told to immediately reject it. But to me, that seemed like rejecting, obviously, what I had known as this term Christian. Okay, so in Christianity, we were told to believe this means follow Christ. What changed when most of us were awakened from our religious trance is that we say that we saw the actions of what we believe to be a Christian, and those things did not line up to Torah. Okay? And so immediately it became, this can't be, I'm not even going to ever look at this word again, and anybody that I know that's associated with this, I am now going to bash them because they are not in Torah. Okay. And just in case you don't make it past this part, most Christians I know are not in Torah. So I'm not disagreeing with the deductive reasoning. Okay. But in doing so, it immediately sent us into like a tailspin, and then we began to negatively connotate anything that had to do with this word. In doing so, we left behind many of our loved ones who had not come to this revelation. Okay? Because words mean things, and redirecting and properly understanding what they mean can literally change from life from life to death, or vice versa, it is very, very important that we take a step back, and we're going to look at the progression, or better yet, the digression of the word Christian, to better help the ones we love understand their place and position in Torah based upon the profession of their faith. One of the successes and I'm grateful to the Most High for this, that I've had with talking to people about this truth, is that you start from where they are. So my initial response to people who use Jesus or who still consider themselves to be Christians is not to educate them to where I am, but to understand where they are and then see if they're open to going through and figuring out what the rest is. Because sometimes you pry open doors before they're ready to be open, and it results in destroying the whole door frame. And so one of these things is this word Christian. Most Christians have not moved past the initial Greek Strong's definition for this word to really see what it means to be called something, and then how being called something actually drives the action behind that which is called. That sounded kind of confusing. I'll explain it more. Okay. So what we're going to be doing by defining what this word means and going from Greek back to the Hebrew is giving people who we're trying to reach a lens adjustment. So we're not changing or redirecting the focus. We're just asking them to look more intently on what they're already focusing on. Okay? So so that they who already see themselves as the follower of Christ, but really a lot of them don't really embody any of the tenets of the Hamashiach and what he is, being the Word made flesh. It'll allow them to ultimately see the Hamashiach and ultimately see that by claiming to be something, you have to put action behind that which you claim to be. And once you understand what you're supposed to be, how you define yourself is going to also go back to where it's supposed to be. Okay, so when words are defined a certain way, they create certain actions. Literally, the whole universe is created by words. So when the Most High created the universe, he spoke it into existence. You can go to Genesis 1:1 and start there and see that in the beginning, the Most High created the Aleph Tav in Hebrew, and then the heavens and the earth. So the heavens and the earth are created by words, and those words are spoken, and those words are spoken with a definition on what they're supposed to do. So anytime we name something, then we're giving it an action. So if you look through the names in Scripture, the Shem, or the character, or the essence of something, you're going to see that the name is very, very closely related to the life of that person, because by naming someone something, you then begin to define their life. I know that sounds very, very deep, and a lot of us have haphazardly at sometimes named our children, not seeing that what we named them then began to define who they were. We name our children after their fathers, and then we wonder why children begin to perpetuate the lifestyle of their fathers. Well, those names began to carry the characteristics that have been placed into the universe, and then those names begin to drive the actions of the person to whom the name was put upon. I know it sounds like a lot, but it's gonna make sense in a second. Okay. It was not until recently that we began to look up and redefine words. A lot of us who have come into the knowledge of who we are as a people, we began to redefine words based upon their original historical and root definition. For those of us who understand that all words in the universe stem from Hebrew, it gives us a really good understanding of where to start, or where we're trying to get back to from the start when we're defining words. A lot of people are still using the Webster's Dictionary to define words that they read in Scripture, and it only perpetuates the blindness by using words that have been lost in translation and trying to reapply them in a modern context. Okay, so we're going to start with Acts 11:26. All right. So Acts chapter 11:26. If you have your Bible or your phone, I'm going to be using, for the sake of this one, if you have My Sword, so this is for Android people. I'm an Android and Apple person. So if you have a tablet, you can download My Sword if you have an Android tablet. The reason why I recommend it is because the app My Sword actually allows you to have the ancient Hebrew lexicon of the Bible embedded in your dictionary. So like when you use Strong's and you tap on a word or a Greek or Hebrew number, it's going to give you a definition. Well, you can change the dictionary by which that word is looked up in to the ancient Hebrew lexicon for New Testament and Old Testament words. That is a tool that's definitely to have. I will do another video for those of you who don't have Android and who only have Apple, because Apple phones don't have that particular app because it's a long story, but you have to have a native open system to be able to download the dictionary within it. So I'll show you how to do it with books, because the books that are used to allow that process to happen is it goes from Greek to the Greek Septuagint, which is the Old Testament that was translated into Greek. And then what it does is it finds the equivalent in the Greek Septuagint and then translates or gives you the equivalent for that Greek word that was originally in Hebrew. Thus, it allows you to use both the New Testament and the Old Testament in Hebrew, and you can define the word in Hebrew. I know that was a lot, but we'll do a video on that. Okay, so we're going to Acts 11:26. And it says, "And when he had found him, he brought him unto Antioch. And it came to pass that a whole year they assembled themselves with the called out ones, or with the assembly, and taught much people. And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch." Okay, so just quickly, if you have that source, you can literally click on it, and it's going to give you the term Christian, and then it's going to give you G5547. For those of you who don't know, G stands for Greek, so it's going to give you a Greek lexicon. It's going to give you 5547. Okay, so most of the time in the New Testament, we're not allowed in theology to redefine these words based upon their original intent, because a lot of people have been convoluted into thinking that just because we have a Greek New Testament, that it was written with a Greek mind. I'm not going to get into the argument at this moment, but we can have that discussion whether or not the Old New Testament was written in Hebrew as well. But what we will talk about is that I write in English, but when I write in English and I'm talking about Hebrew things, I write with a Hebrew mind. I'm not writing with the English person's mind, nor with a Western thought. So it should also be translated to the writers if you believe they were writing in Greek to Greeks, that when they were doing so, they were still using the concrete Hebrew mind. Okay? So, what I told you what the Septuagint does. So Strong defines Christian. Actually, let's go here. Let's take it back one. G5546, as a follower of Christ. That's where you get it. So it's a follower of Christ. For many of us who were passing through the Christian experience, because I don't believe anything is static, it's very, very action-based. We were passing through the Christian experience. A follower of Christ, right, is a definition that most of us understand what a Christian to mean. And giving, I guess, some credit, if you looked it up and you went to the Strongs, which I'm sure most of the people who were perpetuating this thought did, this is what you got, this is where you stopped. So back to my original point of when we're talking to people who are in the stage of the Christian experience, because I think that's a better way to term it, people who are in the stage of the Christian experience and have not yet progressed through the stages of their spiritual awakening, but are in the stage of the Christian experience, most of them are here. And so what I'm going to show you is a progression from this word Christian to what a Christian was and what the people were actually being called, which gives us a definition for what our action should be as followers followers of Christ. All right. So let me erase this, and I'm going to set up a new board because it's going to run down. And actually, the rest of this is going to be actually super quick because it doesn't take long to see it once you can see it. All right. So the first thing we had was Christian. Okay. And that was G5546. Okay. We want to get to the root. Okay, so we're trying to get to the root of the Greek. Let me stop on this side. All right, so next we have the word Christos, right? So that's where we get our word Christ, right? G5547. Okay? And a little bit further down, we get to the word Creo. So for me, when I first came into this truth, a person stopped me right here. So I was like, oh, okay, Creo, that's not the word I'm looking for. That's not, a Hebrew. So I'm going to stop here. And so this is G5548. So it literally means, to give you an easy definition, it means the idea of contact or to smear, okay? So 5548. So as you see, if you know what this word already means, we're getting close to the definition. So this one is the act of being a follower of Christ. This one is literally Christ or the Messiah in Greek. This one, though, means the act of smearing or rubbing. Right? So immediately you're like, how, what, why, how do these two connect? Okay, this is where this gets super cool for me. Okay, so I'm going to leave this up for a second so you can just go through that process. So Christian is the action form. So a follower of Christ. Christ is the Messiah. Creo is the act of smearing or rubbing to consecrate, actually maybe this part, to consecrate for an office. Okay. So as you see, if you know what Messiah means, then you've seen that as you've gone through, there was an actual definition given for what this word meant. But still, it doesn't get us back to where obviously we need to be. All right, so if you have that, I'm going to erase it. A couple more seconds. You can go back and pause and write that down. I recommend that you do. Okay. So I'm gonna put the word Christian back up there, but I'm not gonna do that same progression. I just want to keep it up there so we know where we're heading or where we're coming from. All right. So when you get to that word Creo, if you are tracing it back through the Septuagint, for that word smear, you're going to get one word, and then for the action that's attached, there's going to be another word. So this word is actually defined Hebraically into two words that gives us the action and the action or how we should act and what's actually happening. So I'll give you it in reverse of how I have it. So you have the word, the Hebrew word, H4886. And this word is a word that we should all be pretty familiar with at this point. It's Mashach, and it's the root for the word Mashiach, for Messiah. And it literally means to smear on oil to those taking an office. Okay, starting to see a similarity. An office of priest, king, or prophet. Okay, so when we got that word Creo, I'll just write it over here, right? It led back to this word. So it gives us what Christ was, which was we know him as prophet, priest, and king, okay? But it literally meant to smear oil. So if you're called by the word Christian, it literally means one who is anointed is the term. Okay. Right? One who is anointed. So when they were calling these people Christians, the first thing that they were gathering a parallel between was one who was anointed. Okay? So they knew by function, whoever the writer was, right, that Mashach in the Hebrew had to be connected to Creo in the Greek. They were not separate. You're not moving forward to a time where now you're believing that things are split. It had to be directly connected to what that function was for a Hebrew person. Okay, so going out on the limb and saying that the term Christian in its original intent, not its modern intent, but its original intent was literally connected to being a Hebrew and being one who was anointed. Okay, now let me give you the second word, that if a person does not believe that being a Christian means being a Hebrew, because that's a very big argument that I've been facing with a lot of people who are close to me, this one solidifies it. So we have this word Mashach, put that back up, which means anointed. And this means now not just for the Messiah, but for those who are also following, right? So the next word is this word, H3251, and the root word is suk. So Samik Vav Kaf Sofit, and it literally comes from the word yasak, like this. So if you had a yod in front, yasak, and the word means to pour into a cast, make a replica, or exact imprint. So when the people in Scripture, I'm going to just put that like that, were in the New Testament, Acts 11:26, were calling the disciples in Antioch Christians, they were doing it under the understanding, they were defining them, whether they were saying it for a negative or a positive, they were defining it based upon their actions. Their actions were as the anointed, so they were acting literally as they had defined the Messiah. And to the extent that they were an exact replica or an imprint of the Hamashiach. That sounds like that's a stretch, but I'm going to show you that it's not. Because it is exactly what the requirement of a Christian under their terms would be doing. A Christian under the terms of the people at Antioch that were calling the disciples this term, obviously that related back to this Hebrew word, were seeing them as functioning as Hebrews, similar, not even similar, exactly like the Mashiach. Okay? We're going to look at some verses that the Hamashiach gave and see if any of those things are in relation, or if they were actually doing, the disciples were doing what they had been told to do, and if they were being called based upon those actions. Were they being called out on those actions? So, as we know, in Matthew, the Hamashiach in Matthew 10 and in 24, he's going to tell his disciples, his Talmudim, what them mimicking or following or replicating his actions, what the ramifications for that was going to be. So let's go to Matthew 10 and 22. And it says, "And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, but he that endureth to the end shall be saved." So in the Greek sense at Antioch, when they were called Christians, they were calling these people out literally toward persecution. In a parallel universe almost now, Christians do nothing exactly like the Hamashiach, because they say they don't have to, because all those things have been done by him already. But the disciples in Antioch, who were much closer to the understanding than we are today, did not see his work being finished, but literally saw that the mandate was to carry out his work so exact that they would be mistaken almost for him, for his mission, and in turn be killed or be persecuted similar to him. So modern day Christianity takes away the exact replication of the actions of the Hamashiach and does away with them. Thus, there's no parallel between the two. Thus, the only persecution that is received is for hating other people and not necessarily being hated of people for pushing forward that which is of the Hamashiach. Okay. Next one, Matthew 24. Let's go there. Having a little trouble. Give me a second. All right, Matthew 24, verse 9. Literally says, "Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake." So any of us who've watched the other videos, if you haven't, you can go back. But we talk about what name means. And a name is literally the literal breath and essence of a person. It's their character. It's the thing that makes that person who they are. And it's also, name is also the fame of a person, the story that which has gone forth and has been told about that person and what they've done. So he said persecuted for his name's sake, literally making a replica, an imprint. The imprint of the Hamashiach and the story was something to be persecuted for. Okay, what he did and how he did it. It's not just what in his name, but how he actually did it. So often I hear people, when celebrities or people get on TV, they say, "Oh, they said the name Jesus. That person is going to get persecuted for God's name's sake or Jesus' name." And I'm like, just because you say the name doesn't mean that you're embodying the characteristics of the quote-unquote name. And obviously we now know that that's not even his name. So let's try it again and maybe say what his real name is and see if that persecution ensues, which it will, because that name is a name under which all the power has been given. Okay, next one, and we're going to do John 15, 18. So John chapter 15. Verse 18, and we're looking at what it looks like to be a true follower of the Hamashiach. John 15 says, "If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you, because you are his own. But because you are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you. Remember the word that I said unto you, the servant is not greater than his master. If they have persecuted me, they will also persecute you. And if you have kept my sayings, they will keep yours also. But all these things will they do unto you for my name's sake, because they know not him that sent me." Okay, so literally, once again, we're seeing that the persecution and the call of an anointed one, as they were calling, came with that persecution because they were replicating or becoming exact imprints of the message and of the walk of the Hamashiach. So this idea that you're doing opposite means that you're looking just like everybody in the world. Like, it's strange for me. I work in the secular world. And so I know what it looks like to be around Christians who say they believe the whole Bible, and be a person who believes the whole Bible but looks completely different than the Christians in my midst. So I'm in a room and I am a Torah-keeping Hebrew who understands and believes in the Hamashiach, but I have no connection whatsoever with the Christian people in the room. Literally, they don't use the Messiah's name. They don't eat like the Messiah. They don't speak like the Messiah. They don't dress. And let me preface that with, they don't care about anything Torah-based, and everything about them is fluid and ambiguous. And so to be in a space where both of us, by definition, because I believe in the Hamashiach and nobody understands believing in the Hamashiach, keeping the Torah as not being Jewish, both of us technically in a space where if we put down our beliefs would be considered what to be quote unquote modern day Christians, because they believe they're followers of Christ, right? But when you survey it and you look at the actions behind it, it's very different. Okay, Matthew chapter 5, 13. Literally says, ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and to be trodden under foot of men. So when you've made the digression, as I said before, from Yisak and Mashiach to a Christian, it's literally the digression of salt losing its savor. Because now you have lost the action by which the world is supposed to be gathered to Yah and to his people. And when that happens, there's nothing more than that can be done than for this term to be thrown away. So I remember in the beginning I was telling you about the term Christian. The reason why I stopped using this term in definition of myself when I came into this truth was not because I didn't understand the progression, but that I immediately understood the digression. And by calling myself a Christian, it negated all of the things that I stood for as a Hebrew. Does that make sense? Okay, so for a lot of us, showing people the progression and then the digression away from being the salt of the earth can literally cause a person to say, oh, I get it. Because I don't want people to think of me as lawless. Because if you talk to people, most people don't want to be thought of that way. And when you're talking about being a follower of Christ and you understand through action what it means, then it causes you to get rid of those things that have then kept you saltless. You have to get rid of those terms. And that's why I personally, and those who understand the walk of the Hamashiach and how we're following him as Yah's people, have chosen to rid themselves of this term. So for those of you who are watching who are not Christians, I know that's a long way, and who don't use the term anymore. That was a long way to get to this point, but it was proving a point that it's easier to take away the term and put up here, 2 Corinthians 11:22. 11:22. And define yourself in that way. After you have seen that no one during that time considered themselves to be a Christian, and that was a term given based upon a Greek Western understanding of what was happening in their faith and in their culture. Okay, so we're still in the very early stages of understanding what it means to be a holy nation. It's like a child coming into the realization of who they are as royalty. And a lot of us are doing it in a way that doesn't properly convey who we are, what we are, and how we arrived at the place of who we are. It's hard to give directions to a person if you're at the final destination and you just say, hey, I'm here. And the person doesn't know how to get where you are. And so often in this walk, and I also perpetuated that in the beginning, saying, this is wrong, you need to be here. And negating the fact that I also went through several steps to get where I'm going. And so when you have people who are still in a place of denial, you can't just say I'm here, get where I am, because we're forgetting the fact that it took us time to get where we are. Just like you wouldn't put your baby or your child or your niece or your nephew or somebody that was dear to you on a bike without training wheels, or you wouldn't take their training wheels off before letting them know that they were no longer on there, sending them to, be traumatized by falling off the bike. You would let them know ahead of time, look, I'm taking the training wheels off and I want you to try riding this bike without the training wheels. And there's patience and there's close proximity to that person while they're making that transition with love and care that allows them to feel confident in riding that bike. The same is true when you begin taking off the training wheels and off the systemic oppression of religion and religious terms from people who are using those as training wheels to get through life. You cannot be impatient. Now, if that's not what you want to do and that's not what's for you, then don't do it. Don't participate. Leave it to somebody else. I tell you what, leave it to somebody like me who actually cares about somebody actually coming into the knowledge of who they are. But to chastise during learning is not the Hebraic way of teaching. And so if that's your approach to teaching, you probably are not a teacher. Your approach has to be coupled with patience, and then there also has to be that point where even in your patience and even in your teaching, you have to leave the student alone. There's also the admonition from the Hamashiach that once you have done your due, and that time period is determined probably by your frustration, but once you have done all that you can, a person has still not come to this knowledge, especially people that we love, because it's better with people that we love. You have to shake the dust from your sandals and keep going, because then what you create is an enemy, and not only enemy to you, but an enemy to the faith. And that's very, very dangerous, because we are in the land of our captivity and we are called to live peaceably amongst these people. And when you get frustrated and throw a tantrum when a person does not want to transition from being a saltless Christian to a Torah-keeping anointed one who is a replica of the Hamashiach, you create enemies for the faith in a land that we have no voice. Okay, so I just wanted to put that out there, because I know a lot of people are really passionate about this truth, like I am, but we have to be careful. Okay, lastly, there are levels and steps of patient application, and truth removes the scales. Not how loud you say it, not how many times you say it, but truth for those who are actually called. Saw somebody post a quote the other day, and they posted, very popular one, all things work together for the good for those, all things work together for the good. And I remember as a Christian perpetuating that thought. But scripture also goes further to say, for those who are called according to his purpose. And so sometimes we want the good for those who have rejected the call, right? So we have to be careful of that as well, because then you end up casting pearls among swine. Okay, 1 Peter 2:9 is where we're going to end, looking at the function that the writers in the New Testament saw for a Hebrew. We're looking at Peter. And he says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Praises, not frustration. Praises. We are grateful. We are happy. We are elated to be awakened into this truth. We are not angry anymore. We have to stop being angry so that we can be the light that we're called to be. Because which in past time we were not a people, but are now the people of Yah, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. Dearly beloved, I beseech you as strangers and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts, which war against the soul, having your conversation honest among the Gentiles, that whereas they speak against you as evildoers, they may by your good works, which they shall behold, glorify Yah in the day of his visitation. That's the important part. Because of the changing of terms, a lot of these Christians who are Hebrews by birth and by election have seen themselves as Gentiles. When you take away the definition, then you take away the terms by which people define themselves. If Christians are people who eat pork and who celebrate pagan holidays, then Christians have then become Gentiles, which means that those Hebrews see themselves as Gentiles because they see themselves as Christians. So we have to handle them the way we would handle Gentiles, by living and having a good report, so that those things, by keeping Torah, they call us evil. They will see the blessings of Yah in us and then look to us as good, and we'll be the same ensign to them as we're supposed to be to the true Gentile. I know that is a lot, and it's been a lot for me too, just trying to understand how to navigate through secularism and through our people in order to just gently awake them. Yes, the alarm is sounding, and yes, there has been lots of slumber, and we've slept enough, but the worst way to be woken up is to be startled awake, because then it creates anxiety and fear throughout pretty much the rest of your morning. I'm talking about a person who literally got woken up like that yesterday by my alarm. And so while there is still time, start the process subtly. And then as you begin to apply more pressure and more knowledge and more understanding, and as the Most High and through his Ruach begins to open up these people's eyes, you will see that the anxiety to transition becomes less. But really right now, we're really scaring people. And we're making it difficult for the people who are within this truth to operate in the secular world without being seen as a terrorist or as a person who hates people. And I'm talking for me and other people who still have to function in the secular realm because of call, not necessarily always because of choice. And when those of us who don't have to function or operate in that form perpetuate those negative stigmas that come with being a follower of the Hamashiach that has been put upon us literally once again by media and camps, we make it difficult for those who are wanting to awaken to fully step in and embrace the persecution that is also going to come in this walk. So I hope that helped. I hope that seeing that stage and that progression or digression that many of people have made into calling themselves Christians and away from calling themselves Hebrews or Hebrew Israelites helps you to see how much mental damage has been done, and that if it is your call and if it is your place, to then step in and help that transition in the way that will be beneficial to the person and to all the other people who our light is supposed to shine on as the chosen people of Yah. All right? Shalom, shalom.